welcome to Electrifying an Icon. My name's James McLaughlin and I'm the editor of Car Design News. Now, the move towards electrification continues to present opportunities to revive and reinvent famous nameplates, and none more so than the F-150 Lightning. Billed as Ford's truck of the future, the Lightning encapsulates the direction of travel for icons of the combustion age. The F-150 is a phenomenal success story. It's been the best-selling vehicle in the United States for the last 45 years. So how do you reinvent a classic? And is there an appetite for an electrified F-150? What other design opportunities does a shift to EV afford? Will the Lightning capture a generation of consumers? Or is it a case of Ford taking the existing ones with them down the road to battery power? Now, I've asked a lot of questions there, and here to help me answer them, I hope, Ehab, Kaoud, Chief Designer, Interior and Exterior for Trucks at the Ford Motor Company, and Mark Sich, Digital Design Manager in that all-important user experience. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Very pleased to have you. I suppose my first question is quite a straightforward one, quite a basic one, I guess. But I mean, you're dealing, I mentioned there, sort of reinventing a classic, I suppose, and they always say don't mess with the classics. But I wondered what from both of you, what your start point was with the approach to this project. Maybe I'll start with you, Ehab.
Yes, absolutely. Especially with the F-150, I mean, you already mentioned 45 years of leadership. That is big. That just does not happen. And you know what the reason it's that way, it's by design. So when you think about this vehicle, it's all about a relationship, the relationship between Ford Motor Company and the customer base. And Ford Motor Company listening to what the customer says, and not just listening, but also acting upon what we're hearing. And the result is we get rewarded by, by the customer making us the best-selling vehicle. That is really, it's as simple as that, frankly.
A listening exercise. And Mark, was this a similar approach for you? I mean, it's an interesting role, a user experience. It's the one that's evolving the fastest and probably has the most opportunities for nuance, but it's also the one that's loaded with pitfalls, if you like. So I wonder where you began with this project.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you always have the challenge of, sort of the norm door, right? In which, do you pull and do you push? But the reality is, we see the customer evolving, especially the truck customer, which has historically sort of been a little bit more traditional in their approach. And the fact that they are actually engaging in more of a digital expression, they're actually sort of talking to people. They use technology. They're not technophiles. They're really interested in using technology to enable to establish something that is useful and sort of honest and has an integrity. And that is the biggest challenge that we saw as we started thinking about how to proceed with an F-150 that utilizes this sort of digital experience specifically for a Lightning customer, right? So it's this balance, right, that has to be achieved, and it's sort of a real challenge to make sure that you get that correct. And just as Ehab sort of mentioned, we do a lot of clinicking, do a lot of study of what the customer's really interested in, and we'll probably get into that a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I another question for both of you. This idea of balance is quite an interesting one. But did you see this kind of the Lightning as this kind of transitional project or a vehicle that could sort of open up new avenues, unlock new customers, as opposed to the original version? I mean, how much was this an opportunity for you to push things forward? Ehab, maybe you could take that.
Absolutely. I think we before we ever put a pen to paper, we went on a research spree, and not just in the normal places where we usually go for trucks like Texas, Colorado, but we went to Boston, we went to Florida, we went to Los Angeles. as well as Texas and so on. And to understand where the values are in these places. And based on that, and we're starting from like very macro, point of view. So we started there, came back to the studio, and we went back to research. Now we're armed with some thoughts that kind of like takes us to the next level. And then we came back to the studio, and something came up that I thought was very important, and that was from our CEO, Jim Farley. He said, if and not just for this vehicle, but in general, if you want to describe a vehicle in 2 words, what would those be? Based on your research, based on what you know about the customer, based on what the vehicle, in this case, what the vehicle stands for, because we know a lot about it. Mm-hmm. So we actually took we stepped back, looking at the research, looking at imagery and what those 2 words may be. And we ended up with 2 words, ingenious and capable.
Interesting.
And it was not just from design. It was almost on a bi-daily. Is that right? Bi-daily, every other day. Where we sat with the marketing team, some engineers as well, program planning, design, and to develop those 2 words. And once we got there, it was almost an aha moment. We know where to go now, and now we can actually start designing this vehicle. Naturally, same as F-150, it's about human-centric design, because whether I'm designing an F-150 or a BEV or whatever, we're all built in the same way. So how we use the vehicle, how we interact with the vehicle, how we our pain points are pretty much the same. So that was important. Now, for this customer, whom we call the Bold Guardian, there are 3 anchor points. So we chose to take these 3 anchor points and put them on like a sort of a triangle. So on each corner, in each angle of the triangle, we had 1 word that described that customer. That was prior to the 2 words. Okay. Mm-hmm. Higher order calling is 1. Purposeful is another. The 3rd one is enduring legacy.
Yes.
Right.
So what's interesting about this, if you look at those 3, higher order calling, enduring legacy, and purposeful, it allows us to get quicker to a design rather than, okay, I'm going to design a vehicle, okay, and we need to do a bandwidth of designs. You can go as far east as possible, as far west as possible, and you may not hit the spot. We're trying to find as quick as we can the sweetest spot, and based on these 3 words, you kind of, the sweet spot is like somewhere in the middle of that triangle. So those were the things that were very beneficial to us and got us to move quickly on the design.
Thanks, Ehab. Good eye, Mark. Ingenious and capable. These are 2 very, very sort of strong words. One suggests sort of a sort of functional simplicity. The other suggests a very intricate thought process. And I wondered how you sort of marry those 2 things from your point of view.
Yeah, well, that's kind of an interesting dilemma, right? Because in a lot of ways, you have almost opposing forces that are working here, right? The idea that, you're supposed to be branding yourself Ford tough, and yet still being able to sort of establish yourself as sort of tech forward and digital. those two do not normally sort of fit together in sort of an easy relationship. Obviously, the way that we sort of thought about it is, again, speaking to a lot what Ehab was discussing, is really thinking about that customer, the bold guardian, and establishing, sort of an experience expression as how to move that forward. In essence, we really started to think about what the individual experiences are and help using that human-centric design language as the core tenet to sort of allow us to almost think about things in sort of an Occam's razor sort of logic, right? It's almost, keep the solution simple. And within that sort of established direction, even from a visual vocabulary, et cetera, that's sort of how we thought about proceeding with the digital experience elements. I think as an example, perhaps one of the solutions that we were looking at is this concept that you have honesty and integrity. Digital experience really is sort of the new horsepower, if you will. But here's a vehicle that actually has incredible horsepower. But in a stationary moment in which a lot of these vehicles actually live, they bring these trucks to work sites. They sort of activate, that engagement with, that they're either doing something for recreation or they're doing something for work. We started to think about, we have Pro Power on board as an example. That can power your work site. You can bring your power tools, you can plug them in, that sort of stuff. But the reality was, where was the expression that we could really push and experience and think about the power of this vehicle, the honesty of this, and bring it to another fruition, sort of a much higher level? And so we even thought about something that we call bi-directional power. So we knew that you're going to be plugging in your vehicle, you're going to have it overnight. Say there's, and so you're charging your battery from your home. What happens if there's suddenly a blizzard or a snowstorm, right? And then all of a sudden your power to your house goes out. And the idea that the truck now can effectively be the power to the house. So it can actually take over and power your house and charge it, right? Obviously, in order to do that, that's a very technical issue. There's a lot of nuancing that has to go into it, that you really have to walk someone through a process, because obviously there's not only, how does the vehicle set itself up so it can do this, but also how do you do it safely so that, if the power jumps back on or whatever, that you're not driving power into the grid, as an example. And, that sort of communication required, months and months of us doing explorations, thinking about how people want to interact. How do you walk them through a very complicated set of elements? And just really sort of push that side of it. So it's a marriage of, the human aspects, the humanity. How do people think? And what does the technology give them? So I don't know if that's a little bit of a side.
No, that's a great answer. And I think, you are, I know that a lot of the research that you've done really focused on sort of different areas, geographical areas of the United States, from what Ehab was saying, which I find absolutely fascinating, because the United States is so huge and so diverse, and there's so many different topographies and everything. So this idea that there may be a blizzard, did that come from some of the kind of research where you were going, the people you were talking to? I mean, what did that bring, that kind of that work, that United States, the tour of the country? These are the nuggets that it brought up.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we started thinking about what the capability of the vehicle is going to be. And then on top of that, we started doing these sort of what if scenarios, playing out the experience aspect of it is, and just like you said, we were talking with people from Texas who unfortunately did have a blizzard and knocked out most of their power grids. And this would have been a perfect opportunity for them to sort of mitigate that situation. But, just thinking about even some of the other environments, what would these capabilities, these situations allow? And just playing those what if scenarios was really critical in thinking about how to develop an experience-based technology.
Yeah. By the way, when after doing the first set of research, the first two researches, we went back one more time, and something came up that was really clear as we do this, and that was this customer is interested in something that is distinct but not different.
Yes.
They're not interested in a science experiment. They're more interested in something that is, they're very pragmatic, and whether, they're interested in getting a job done. And that job is maybe on a construction site, or that job could be pulling a very expensive boat or a trailer with a thoroughbred horse. So it could vary from that all the way up from a life style standpoint, but distinct and not different. That allowed us to go into this next level and honing in the design quicker, to and making sure that it is appropriate. And what was interesting was, once we were done with the design according to the Ford process of product development, we usually, once we're all done, we get a model that is an inside and outside. It has the interior, it has the exterior. You can get inside it, and in many cases, you can drive it like 10 miles an hour in a courtyard, with a little battery operated. It's full size. It's a real truck, but it's not. You can't take it on a highway. So when we took that to that research, and naturally we included an F-150 that at that point had just or it was in the process. We were in the process of launching, as well as images of potential electric vehicles that were out there, and that really validated everything that we had gone through that year. So it was an eye-opener, because all of a sudden, yes, this is exactly what we were thinking. And by the way, I mean, really, we are doubling production. That in itself speaks volume for that vehicle and for the customer base, and many of them are not substitutional but incremental. That to me is something very big as well.
Just moving sort of slightly, we talked about ingenious and capability, and we talked about some of the work that Mark's done. But I wondered, we talked about the design. What about the form language of the Lightning? Because you mentioned there, Ehab, no one wanted a science experiment, and we've seen a few science experiments from various companies, which I won't mention today. But I wondered how this not a science experiment manifested itself in the sort of the muscles of the car, the front face, the mask, the detailing. If you could talk us a little bit through that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think Mark touched base on it, and I even mentioned it in the beginning, and that is human-centric design. Okay, when I was at Art Center, we had the aerodynamic professor, And he says this, and it always stuck in my head, that when you're designing a vehicle, a car, you're designing it from the inside out versus, let's say, an airplane. An airplane is all about aerodynamics. It's gotta, you're gotta be able to take off
Right.
and to land, right? With cars, it's different. It literally begins with the driver in the proper position, road command position. Something I'm very sure from a packaging engineering type of thing, we consider the hip point in relationship to the heel of the driver, in relationship to the steering wheel, and what they see out and around them. So it comes back to this human-centric. The part that is shared with the internal combustion F-150 is that middle portion where the occupants are. And what's interesting about that, it is borderline, I don't want to say perfect because there's always room for improvement, but it is borderline perfect from an occupant standpoint, from packageability, from storage and space to accommodations, all of that, including the latest thing, which Mark does a very good job of on the UX and UI side, right? Once that's in place, okay, the rest of it becomes a lot simpler. So having that, which is perfect, and working our way rearward and forward, from the A-pillar forward and from the C-pillar rearward, that really kind of like set the tone for the vehicle. When you think exterior, you want the vehicle to have the proper stance. So we've done that with the F-150. That's the internal combustion, and it carries naturally into the BEV, and that is on the exterior from a design standpoint. Wheels and tires and how they relate to the body, that is the most important thing. So the stance where the vehicle is planted, on the ground, and the wheels and tires are 90 degrees to the floor, and they're flush or a little bit over flush to the body itself. That's where it's at. With the F-150, we actually were able to pull the wheels out, and we were able to get higher diameter tires. So we got that in place. Going from there and working our way in, it was wanting to make sure that the person on the inside is protected and feels safe. When we researched the F-150, naturally there are certain cues that we do from a design standpoint. If you notice an F-150, you know it from very far away because it's got the drop-down built in the side. And that's not only for visual differentiation, but it's also for functionality, which is very important for that customer. Purposeful is one of the anchor points, right? So that becomes a visual importance, okay? In this case, of course, you have and you kind of see it on the image there. You don't have a gasoline door on the rear. You have a charge port on the front. How do you take that and give the customer that distinct and not different flavor while maintaining the idea of strength in the stance and this idea of built for tough? So we chose to have to do these fender flares, as you can see there, but still the wheels and tires are further outside of that, and the flares are kind of they come into that hard edge that is more on the horizontal side, that gives you this beautiful pool of light around it as it works its way into the top of the fender, into the hood on the front, as well as the box in the rear. What's interesting about all of this is now that you get to the front, where if you open that hood, there is no engine anymore. So all of a sudden you have this huge space that actually becomes even more important, especially in terms of the security that we have to deal with in the world around us. So now I have lockable storage on that front that you can fit 8 bags of cement in. That is big.
Mm.
So the design of the hood and the way it is accommodates for that. 400 liters of space and 400 pounds of what you can carry in there. As well as when we talk about ingenious and capable, if you notice, the hood is a waterfall hood. So it sits up high, it gives you the strength, and it gives you that built-for tough quality. But as it comes down, you don't have to pick up something and you have to pull it all the way up over the headlamps and so on, and then dropping it in. And then when you pick it up, you have the same problem. That's not human-centric, okay? So we were able to take that lower point like we do, we do with car trunks, but in this case on the front, that you can take things, you naturally have to pick it up, but you can slide it in now. That was big. And by the way, it's all electric as well. And you can open it in many ways. You can open it through the B-pillar door codes. You can open it through the key fob. You can open it through a button that's on the lower of the bumper, between the bumper and the hood, or you can open it through the inside with a button. So and it automatically goes up, it automatically comes down. So and that kind of comes back to the idea of ingenious and capable. Okay, we didn't stop there. We looked at what do you do with that front and that space. So we added extra storage within storage. So underneath there is actually another hidden storage that you can use for beer bottles. Okay, and it becomes like an ice pack. Okay, you can use it for sodas and so on. Okay, and we even added a screw that you can open so you drain the water, or you can use it to hide your valuables. Okay, we didn't stop there, but we also added a couple of USBs. We added the electric plugs in there. We have 4 hooks on that inside of that vehicle on the floor, and we have another, I believe there are 5 hooks up higher. So in every which way, they serve purposes, and all of these purposes are based on certain, be it pain points or certain social aspects that we want to make sure the customer is satisfied in.
It is incredible use of kind of a void where, which is afforded by the EV platform. Mark, just moving inside the vehicle, one of the things you notice when you look at the images is that there is the screen is quite a striking thing. I know in the higher spec models, 15 inches or maybe even more, and I know you guys have got a slightly smaller one. But that does seem quite an intimidating piece of kit to sort of encounter. And I wondered how you used sort of your design skills within UX to sort of use that interaction between the customer and the machine. Good old-fashioned human-machine interface, I think we used to call it. It's probably a slightly older term now, but I wonder if you could speak a little bit around that.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things is obviously the HMI component of it, right? But again, going back to that human-centric thing, the question of honesty and usable technology. So yes, you can put in a giant screen, but if you're not able to present the information in the screen in such a logical fashion, it sort of doesn't allow for people to, again, they will get challenged by it. They won't know where to touch. They get intimidated by it. So what we specifically did for this particular screen is we really started thinking about zones of interaction. In essence, it really was the difference between what we called a dash card UI, meaning that you present information in these concept of cards. They're always sort of there. You can pick on them. You can predict them. They sort of use a scaffolding approach because you have this sort of vertical format. The information that you can bring is actually driven down, sort of top down, so that interaction and the motion logic that it sort of produces enables the people to sort of always understand where they are in relationship to the things that they're trying to do. Have they just started the process? Are they going further into it? And just thinking about it from a hierarchical and being able to use that motion to present information in a way that doesn't surprise them, it's not like, oh, where did that come from? Always allowing them to have some sort of element that sort of predicts where they are. And then on top of that, one of the big critical elements that we really started to think about was machine learning. The fact that this system is going to look at your profile, who's driving the vehicle, how do they actually use the system? And that prediction actually enables the system to actually be sort of predictive in its presentation of information, that it starts affording you, what is next? What chances are you going to be going into another screen? Are you going to activate this? And then seeing from your history, what are the things that you normally use, and then putting them up in front so that you can actually then access them very quickly. The idea was to try to make it as flat of an architecture as possible. So you didn't have the sort of traditional, oh, I got to go back button, right? You would always be able to enable that as sort of a first surface activation and be able to sort of go into that, hit it, and be able to bring that into the forefront for you to be able to engage. That was sort of the full digital implementation, so hence the larger screen. But we did realize, and to be honest, there was a little bit of an experiment going on here. Because of the sort of type of Bold Guardian, this sort of user-centric element, we also realized that there was probably another sort of more of a traditional approach that we would want to also accommodate and have as an option for this truck customer. And that was actually the 12-inch, the smaller of the screen, which is still the largest you can get in the ICE vehicle. But that activation was of a slightly different engagement. We used what we call a sort of a domain-based system in which you actually have buttons that you can go through, you can select. It brings up that information, whether you want to be in the navigation system, into the media stuff. And then on top of that, we also created a secondary screen in which was closer to the passenger, but it's something that you could, put additional content in. which is different than sort of the base systems that you see in sort of the environments of the competition, right? So we are enabling you to have sort of a dual screen activation. And because it was placed where it was closer to the passenger, all of a sudden you have an entirely new experience capable in which you have your driver centric, they have their cluster, full digital cluster, and then they can activate the main domain space. But you're also able to have this secondary screen, which the driver can control and be able to go through and show more pertinent information. But it also enables the passenger to not interfere with what the driver was perhaps utilizing. Maybe he's got a navigation, he or she has a navigation going, wants to see the map on that screen. But the passenger can now actually see some of the information that is normally dedicated to the cluster closer to them. So it changes the dynamic. It's almost like a social experiment, right? Where now all of a sudden, it's not just the driver that's in control of the vehicle, but the passenger also has input capability as well. So that was an interesting element just to the digital side. But on top of that, we also started to think about what would the physical elements be. So within that environment, we also enabled the interior to have digital, a full knob controls, so physical controls, being able to control the HVAC system, which for some of the team, and again, this goes all the way back to the experience of what the particular customer set is trying to use. Do they want to always manipulate it with gloves on, as an example, right? And that's has historically been a challenge with a lot of touch-sensitive screens and being able to do that. But in some conditions, for some customer bases, that's really one of the critical why buys. And so as a result, being able to utilize that is something that really sort of expresses an opportunity. And you can also obviously see here, even on the 15-inch, we did have a physical haptic knob that, again, wasn't totally in the digital realm, but it allowed you to have a different type of interaction that still had sort of a physicality, an honesty based with it.
You notice, James, when we're talking about all of this, it's pure logic and thinking that goes through this. It's not done haphazardly. It's not like, I feel like this today. No, it's actually based on a process and based on feedback that we're constantly getting back and forth, and that is what brings us to make us successful, because we do listen and we do take action. And what the beautiful thing about interiors, I call the F-150 interior business class because you have the fold flat seat. You have the tray that folds down. With the push of a button, the whole shifter comes down. But what's interesting about this, and what Mark adds, is really the next step in what interiors are about. I think there's a lot of fantastic things that you're going to see on interiors with all the technologies that are coming and how vehicles are going to drive themselves. And, as we are introducing Blue Cruise, all of these things kind of give you a sort of like a white canvas on the interior, that the sky is the limit. You can do so many things, and so on, and the move from hardware to software to over the air, and how much you can eliminate out of that interior to give it, the sky's the limit. It's exciting.
I guess on that note, the Lightning, do you see this as a kind of a signal of where the Ford is going just generally? Because this is, to electrify something as iconic as the Lightning is a huge shift. And I just wondered if maybe both of you could put it in the context of where the general direction of travel, I suppose, for Ford in terms of design.
Yeah, you want to start, Mark? You want me?
You can take that one. I mean, because I can go on for hours about the importance of this particular vehicle and what that sort of means from a transition from sort of an ICE and, you know, going into perhaps some of the sustainability aspects. But it's not only that, it's really about the capability, right? And how you can represent it. Obviously, from a digital perspective, it's a little bit harder to, we can show capabilities, we can show features, we can engage in that sort of element. But if you're actually talking about specifically the design and moving forward, yes, we saw this as a huge opportunity to ramp up the sort of visual languages that we wanted to create and sort of brand as Ford capable. And one of the things that we really started to think about was something that we referred to internally as smart surface, right? This idea that in a traditional sort of bring your own device operating system, whether on your computer or on your phone, because they don't know necessarily how the visual language is going to be presented on the screen. Is it, you know, what orientation is it? If it's just a phone, is it horizontal? Is it vertical? With us, because we are sort of automotive centric, right? So we kind of know what the target's going to be, and we understand what type of information we need to present. We really started thinking about how to harmonize that visual language that we've created with the interiors, as an example, with the exteriors. And so from that standpoint, we came up with this idea of sort of skewware flat. The idea is that, you know, with traditional systems, they use flat because they can modify it very easily. But with us, we wanted to bring a little bit more of that emotion, a little bit more of that physicality, that element that is associated with the rest of the vehicle, to make sure it all harmonizes. You're working with a digital, a virtual space, and a physical space, and making sure that the two can talk to each other and feel like they're all designed together has been one of the critical elements that we really started to think about how to actually profess, right? And so as an example, if you look at those cards that I was talking about on the large 15-inch, and you look at the little details of that element, it's not just a flat square box that, okay, that's where information lives. It's got a little bit of craft to it, right? You'll see the little indents that actually kind of remind you of the outer edges of the vehicle, or even the DLO, the daylight opening on the side of the vehicle, where you have that sort of drop down, right? And it's that little shape, that little form that becomes a very strong Ford signature. And you start to see that also incorporated into the digital assets as well. Again, to try to make these things sort of harmonize. And it's that visual vocabulary that, you know, was driven from a need to try to harmonize, that we understand moving forward is probably going to be a signature as we continue to develop.
Fantastic, Mark. Ehab, if you could zoom out somewhat, Ehab, and place the Lightning in the context of the general design direction of Ford, it would be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that really this is only the beginning, and again, from an interior standpoint, with all the technologies that are coming at us, as well as different forms of manufacturability, like what we introduced with the Maverick that had just come out. This sort of do-it-yourself, this 3D printing that, you know, You point your phone to a QR code on the vehicle, and it takes you to this website that you can download parts that you can 3D print to put on your vehicle, in your vehicle. All of these things, from the technology to the over-the-air update, to the move from hardware to software to over-the-air, all of these things are eliminating many things on the interior and expanding what you can do with that interior, including manufacturability, like the 3D printing. The very first part, I believe, that was ever 3D printed on a production vehicle is on an F-150 in China. And that is a cover for the behind the center console for a plug. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is only the beginning. I think at some point we're going to be able to 3D things that are much bigger. The idea of this additive manufacturability, I think it opens much broader range of things from an interior standpoint, but also on the exterior. If you think lighting, if you think of moments as you come to your vehicle and as you come up to it, what the vehicle does based on you're recognizing that it is James who's coming up to it, in terms of how the light works, in terms of how it welcomes you, in terms of like what we've done with the F-150, the 360 lighting, and how that supports the idea of security, safety, as well as, let's say, on a work site, and you forget a tool there. Just having that light makes a big difference. Mm. So all of these things, I think, gives a lot of potential and opportunities for the exterior, as well as a limitless possibilities for the interior as well. And really, with the lightning, it's only the beginning of things. That customer is always evolving, and every few years we go back and look at what that person is about now. So if you look at that customer back in 2008, when the recession was happening, they had a different mentality. You look at that customer back in 2016, where we did another research, that mentality was changing. In 2021, that mentality is yet changing again. So with all of these, it comes back to that relationship between company, customer, and how we actually act upon what the customer is telling us.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ehab. It does sound actually like that there's another road trip around the United States in the offing, not too far in the future, to find out what people are thinking. Well, thanks very much, Ehab, for that interesting view of the endless possibilities of the forward lightning, and thanks very much to Mark as well, Mark Sich, for his thoughts on the future and the current state of UX and what possibly might be coming down the track. Thanks very much, guys, and we hope you stay tuned for the next session.